We've got a couple which are quite similar here. One saying, can we not have a personal relationship with God without using Jesus as a conduit, so without Jesus? And then there's another one on a similar theme. What makes Christianity true, thinking about this theme of happiness, over other religions?
Yeah, good questions. So you might say, well, I like the idea of a relationship with God, but why do I need Jesus to get there? And it's, as I mentioned the other night, quite popular, certainly in Western society and perhaps other systems of belief, to say, well, it doesn't matter what you believe, they all will get you to God, which sometimes is a little bit, as I said, disingenuous towards people of other faiths, because actually they don't clearly say the same things about God at all. In fact, some faiths don't talk about God at all. So to say, well, they all get there and it doesn't really matter which path you choose. The other thing I'd say is the remarkable thing about what Jesus says about himself, and you can check this out as you read front cover, is that Jesus isn't just saying he is kind of a signpost on the way to God, but he's saying he literally is God. He is God revealed in human flesh. So that's why we need Jesus to get us to God, because actually God has revealed himself to us in Jesus. He's not just a prophet, as Muhammad would have claimed. He's not just a wise teacher, as other religions would claim. He's actually claiming to be God, that if you've encountered him, you've encountered God. And so that's quite a remarkable claim, isn't it? If it's not true, it's preposterously arrogant. If it is true, then it's bigger than any other claim that any other religious leader has made. Another way of looking at it would be to say, actually, the barrier between us and God, the thing that stops us from experiencing his love and the relationship with him, is actually this thing that the Bible defines using a word called sin, which is basically the stuff in our life that's wrong, the way that we live that spoils the world, spoils our relationships, and cuts us off from God the Father. And it's a bit like clouds, actually. One guy in the Bible wrote, he says it's like clouds separating us from the sun. And you can experience that if you live in England, of course, because most of the time there are clouds separating us from the sun. And we need that barrier to be cleared away if we're to enjoy the sunshine of God's presence. And if religious efforts were enough, if following a system of religious beliefs were enough to clear away that barrier, great. Jesus seems to say, actually, it's not enough. And that's why we need his death on our behalf. Because actually there are consequences for that stuff that we do that's wrong. And it would separate us from God, ultimately not just for this life, but the life to come, unless it can be dealt with. And Jesus came to deal with that himself. So that would be maybe two ways of looking at that. And then the second question, how do we know that Christianity is true? Is that the question, rather than other religions or Abrahamic faiths? Well, certainly what I'd say on the Abrahamic faith is that Jesus didn't see himself in contradiction to the Judaism of the Old Testament, but actually to be the fulfillment of it. So he said, I haven't come to abolish any of the Old Testaments, but I am the fulfillment of the Old Testament, which was, again, a massive claim to make. The religious leaders of his day found it quite offensive, because they're saying, well, how are you claiming that? Yeah, actually, in many ways, Jesus showed how he was very much the fulfillment of that. And actually, the early followers of Jesus didn't see a problem with that. They just said, we and Jesus are seeing the fulfillment of all of the Old Testament, all of what the Old Testament prophets were looking forward to. And so there was a great continuity in that regard. I would say, though, if we're talking about Abrahamic faith, we often include Islam within that. And I think what we would say is that in terms of the claims that Jesus makes about himself in the New Testament and the claims that Islam makes about Jesus in the Quran and in other Islamic writings, there is clearly a contradiction, because they say very different things about who Jesus is. Christians would say Jesus is the Son of God, but he revealed himself as that. Islam quite clearly teaches that's not the case. And so there is a difference there. And so when I chat with my Muslim friends, we say, look, clearly these are not compatible, and we need to ask the question, is there a good reason for taking one over and above the other? And for me, I'd say, actually, one of the reasons why I would take seriously Jesus' claims in the New Testament is that the sources that we get to the life of Jesus are so close to his life. We're dealing with things that are written within a couple of decades of the events in question, rather than a few centuries later and far more removed from the events in question. So those are a few things, but there's lots more that could be said than that. Keep putting the questions in if you've got more on that, but or chat to me later if you want.